I'm John Fensterwald, a staff writer at EdSource. Last year, we established a teacher advisory committee. It's made up of about a dozen teachers from across California who are active in leadership groups, and they're well respected by their peers. We set it up so that they could share their views on issues that we think are important and that they think a lot about themselves. At our last meeting, we asked them to envision a return to school based on a year of wisdom under COVID. Here are some of the answers that they shared to a couple of questions.
At my school site, we've already had discussions as a staff of trying to plan some sort of summer retreat for the staff to sort of plan out what these first 2 weeks look like, because we don't want it to be haphazard. We certainly don't want students to come back to campus and be bombarded with assessments and the same type of stuff that we were doing before the pandemic. We want the first 2 weeks to be very healing, very relationship driven, and very welcoming and positive, because students had endured quite a bit. I mean, our juniors next year, I teach mostly juniors and seniors. My juniors, I mean, they left campus when they were freshmen. They left as freshmen. They're coming back as juniors, and so much has happened. So those first 2 weeks, I want a lot of conversation, a lot of community building. I don't want technology. I know in my own classes, I'm going to try to adhere for myself. My personal goal is to not have students click on any links or log into anything for those first 2 weeks. And we're just going to do it old school.
If we go back, we're going to play kickball. We're going to play, distance kickball. I'll bring in my large screen TV, and we'll do Just Dance, within our our areas. So, I told them, at least with my class, I can't guarantee anything else, but if we come back, we're going to have that time that we didn't have to build family and build community. We'll do it 6 feet apart, but we're going to take that time to do that. So they're like, well, if it's going to be like that, I go, well, yeah, but just realize it's just me. I don't know what everyone else is going to do, but at least in my class, we're going to build that family that we didn't have a chance to build.
For me, I'm looking forward to going into campus and seeing some of these students, because some of them are just having such a difficult time with so difficult. Students with autism, it's just not working for them at all. So I'm looking forward to kind of getting to the bottom of what they need cognitively, social, emotional, general abilities, so I can have a better handle on how we can help them.
It's all about, almost in a way, re-socializing our kids to be back on campus. And everything is with the focus of making sure that our students' social, emotional well-being is at the forefront, and the academics will come in later.
The students who elect to go to our program, which is an alternative setting for high school, a good portion do not feel connected to their home high school, which is why they elect to come to us. And so every year we spend the first 2 weeks building that community and that cohort, and spending in 2 weeks of orientation just doing that. This year is no different, however it looks, how we go back. But there does need to be a piece, and we've been discussing this, in theory at least, of how do we onboard students to a more traditional experience. Again, after being online for so long, and this as the norm, how can we try to familiarize our students or refamiliarize them with routine, with making it to physical spaces on time, as opposed to just going from your bedroom to the kitchen. And so that's definitely something that we want to focus on.
I think it's also really important that we're including our students' voices. I know I check in with my third graders regularly, and a lot of the learning that we've done this year is learning how to use technology, learning how to be patient and support each other and have compassion and empathy in ways that I think my students understand really deeply. We tried doing SBAC testing online today, and I was nearly in tears. And one of my students told me, "Miss Ariel, take a deep breath. It's okay." And I needed that moment. And, it just reminded me that they have learned a lot, and it's important to listen to them and hear from them what they need going back into the classroom and what things that they have actually enjoyed in distance learning that maybe we can incorporate, because many of our kids are actually enjoying it and have been more focused, and have had different learning opportunities that we could not provide in the classroom. So I just think it's really important, even with our young ones, they can tell us what they need and what they would like to see.
I've never had so many staff meetings where our admin is asking us, what do we think? How do we think it should, how do we think we need to roll this out? And, asking for feedback after we do something. We have not done that in the past. And I think that is really something that I hope continues to carry out moving forward. Even when I think about in the past when we've sent out parent surveys and it will be like, oh, well, only X amount of parents responded. And it's like, oh, well, this time around when they sent parent surveys out, phone calls were made. You got on the phone to try to see, what were the parents' input regarding the school reopening or whatever it was. So I do hope that, voices will continue to be heard and valued as we continue to go forth, because I feel like that is something that occurred during this pandemic.
For me, it's been a trend for my whole career. I came in wanting to be, hold them to strict standards and expectations and sort of across the board, whether it was sort of an arbitrary standard or expectation that I had established regarding a certain procedure or academic standards. And over time, I've learned to relax more on the ones that are arbitrary. This paper is due on Thursday. Okay. But if I get it Friday, really nothing changes. And so why shouldn't I accept it Friday? As long as there's some clarity and consistency around how those things will be handled. When students do have trouble fulfilling a certain obligation or getting something done at a certain deadline, then being flexible opens up a conversation about what's going on, whereas being inflexible and saying, sorry, that was the deadline, that shuts off communication.
A lot of schools and districts and regions, we've built up the infrastructure now. Students all have Chromebooks or some type of device, and internet access is a bit better than it was before the pandemic. And I know, speaking as somebody whose students, oftentimes I have students who have to work or have other responsibilities that cause them to miss a day of school here and there. Technology should make it a lot easier for them to stay engaged. My concern is that it will lead to more juggling on the teacher's part, especially if it seems quote unquote easier now for a student to not necessarily have to be there physically in person. Then as a teacher, that adds to my workload because I have to, obviously juggle the different audiences. So it will be great to see support for perhaps, some kind of position or some kind of help for teachers to in schools to help support students virtually who need to, so that they don't miss out on instruction because they're not physically present.
And I'm listening to you all talk, and it makes me reflect and think about how, for the first time in many years, I feel like I've been using technology based on needs of the students. What is best for us to turn things in and those types of things. So actually, now that I hear you talk about it, I'm actually really excited about bringing that back in. The fact that now I can teach Google Docs and have the students do those things and respond to one another in ways that I do for my writing group, terrific, right? I can use, for example, conferencing software to do my Global Scholars program and do, poetry shares with multiple, cities, classrooms like we're doing, okay? That's cool stuff. I never would have thought to use that prior. So that's a very good point.
Using what worked in distance learning and moving that into the classroom, greeting students at the door, using an emoji check-in. That I think that will make them feel validated. It'll incorporate trust with their teachers, the teachers from last year who they didn't meet, and then maybe going forward the teachers they're going to meet. So just make sure that in the transition, they're going to be the similar tools and move those into the classroom.
How do we focus our lessons as educators around how students feel like they belong in a classroom when they're learning. Like, and I never had really been intentional or purposeful. I would look at like, okay, here's my instructional strategy. Here's like my error analysis. This is what I want them to learn. But like, where is like, how do I know that the student feels like they belong in that seat when we're doing this? And where is the student as like a learner and doer of mathematics? How do they see themselves like, as their identity, that identity piece?
We always knew the inequities were there, but really with COVID, it was really highlighted. We got to see everything on a broad spectrum of what we do to our EL students, what we do to our SPED students, how we neglect certain populations. And so moving forward, my hope is that we can start really, I mean, everybody is exposed here. We could start really handling and recreating systems of practices that actually do help students, do help families.
I teach at a Title I school. I've been there 22 years. I taught through No Child Left Behind. I've taught through Race to the Top, all this good stuff. Many of you have been there right along with me, and I'm tired. I'm sick. I'm sick to see what we've done to students. I don't like the fact that we're basically teaching dependent learners all day long. So I want to see everything shift.
I brought this up many times to my staff in terms of, what does meaningful grading look like? What does empathy in grading look like? And you have a lot of these teachers that take these hard line grading policies that don't benefit their students. It's more of intimidating the students. Okay, if you don't do the work, you're going to fail. And, and if you do the work and it's wrong, you're going to fail. So it's always these gotchas that many teachers have with students based on these archaic grading policies that need to be updated